Hey, good afternoon. Welcome everybody to another episode of Just Two Dads. I am Brian Altounian, and here as always with my gosh, Shawn, I don't know if we can do it anymore. We have to get really good at this. Like my close friend, my partner in Thrive, my colleague, my family, Shawn Francis. Literally, our lives have become so intertwined now that an introduction doesn't even seem to give our relationship justice anymore. So
yeah,
anyways,
there's people that finish each other's sentences, but
right.
we've found, especially earlier today, we were finishing each other's thoughts, which is really
It was
weird. That's like,
it's kind of crazy.
whoa.
It was kind of crazy. So we're excited as always to share with our audience an amazing guest who's doing incredible work in the special needs community. Before I do that, I just wanted to again welcome everybody. Thank you for spending some time with us. For those that are catching us on Facebook Live, hello, and please feel free to put your comments. We'll be able to see those comments in there. For those who are listening to us on podcasts, we're now on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, and Pandora, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and every place that there's a podcast outlet. So please feel free to catch our show there and on our YouTube channel as well. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Share this content with as many people as you can. We really wanted to spend a lot of time in outreach to the special needs community and provide a showcase and a platform for these amazing warriors who are doing such great work for our communities. And that work has the transcendent capability of reaching out to so many. And to talk about how our world has expanded, we have, as we've been mentioning all year, in the beginning of the year, we have added WSTX AM radio in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And so for all of our listeners on the Virgin Islands, welcome. Thank you for listening in, and hope that we're continuing to add value there. So thank you all for your participation, and I'm going to say that was it. Look, I try to keep it short today. And I'm going to throw it over to my co-host and my close friend, Shawn Francis. How you doing today, Shawn?
I am doing well. I am, as always, grateful, thankful, and blessed. And again, thank you to everyone for tuning in on the various platforms, as well as our YouTube channel, WSDX. And let's jump right into it. Our guest today is Mr. Doug Blecher. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks so much for having me.
Most welcome. The pleasure is ours. We like to tell people that this is, technically, you say our show, but the truth of the matter is we have guests on here to make the show theirs, to make it about them, to shine a light on the great work that they're doing in the special needs community. And Brian and I, I'm sure, Brian will attest to this, because I know that my wife and I have experienced this, where people will say, oh my gosh, what you're doing is, so great, working as an activist or, in the community, doing whatever you will for the special needs community as an advocate. But, it's one thing, not necessarily better or worse, but it's one thing to be an advocate in a community that you are a member of by circumstance, as is the case with us as parents to children that have special needs. It is another thing altogether to be a member of that community and an advocate in that community when you are a member by choice. And so I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that. And we like to start out with our guests. Everyone has the capacity within them to be a hero, and every hero has an origin. So I don't know if you were bitten by a spider or if you came from another planet, but tell us where your powers come from and what is it that led you to the path to serve this community, especially not being a member of it.
Well, it's funny you just mentioned talking about another planet, because a friend of mine said yesterday, he said, I'm pretty sure you are from another planet. And I said, yeah, you're probably right. I'm just not aware of it. But I guess my story in the autistic community is about 20 years old now. I had finished up at Ohio State with a psych degree, and then I thought, well, what the heck do I want to do with the rest of my life? So I was looking for employment at the time in Columbus, Ohio. And I didn't really find anything for about 6 weeks or so. And then one day I saw an ad in the local paper, the Columbus Dispatch, about working with an autistic child in his home. And I thought, wow, that looks really interesting. I think I want to do that. So now keep in mind, at that time, I knew nothing about autism, never had met one autistic child, teen, adult, family that had someone on the spectrum, but I applied for the job, and for some reason, this family hired me, and I started working with this kid, and loved every minute of it, and started working with other kids. And then eventually I moved down to Cincinnati because my family was living there. And then I started working with more kids, and this was about 7 or 8 years in, and I was finally getting good at what I was doing, supporting these kids in making progress in their lives. And then, one day I thought, well, what happens when these kids become teens or adults? And so in Cincinnati, I did some research and found out there was not a lot of support for adults there. And then it just so happened that the Autism Society in Cincinnati contacted me right at the time and said, hey, Doug, would you be interested in facilitating our support group for autistic people that are 18 years of age or older? And I said, perfect timing. I was just thinking about this. So I did that for about 3 years, loved every minute of it. But the thing that frustrated me was that it just acted as a support group. And the fact that, someone would come to the group and say, I want to find a job. I want to develop friendships. I want a romantic partner. My mom or dad are just really annoying me at home. I want to learn how to drive. All these different things. And I would give them feedback, and the other autistic people would give feedback to them as well. And I'd feel really good about them leaving the group. But then what would happen was 2 weeks later, they'd come back, and many people would be stuck in the kind of the same place, hadn't made a lot of movement on some of these things. And then it kind of was a light bulb moment. I remember, like, oh, these people need that support that I'm giving kids, just in different ways. So that was kind of the beginning of where I decided I wanted to start a business, autism, and that's kind of where Autism Personal Coach started, where we're providing coaching, hard to find support for teens and adults to kind of reduce their daily overwhelm and help them get the things that they need and want in their lives.
Wow, that's fantastic. I want to take what might be a little bit of a different approach. At this point, I think some people might jump right into exactly the services that you provide and how you go about it. I want to do that. But before we do that, I want to take the dream selling mode. I'm sure there's people here that are listening that have ideas as to things that they may want to do, things they want to pursue, because that's the real purpose of being here on the planet. That's the purpose of being, period, making something out of your life. And people have goals and dreams that they want to accomplish. So you have this idea, you're working in a job, and you identify a need, and you are now able to ascertain that there's a business that you can create by providing an answer to this problem. How did you go about then doing that? Because I don't know if you had money saved, if you know exactly how that was going to be done, because you're an employee for a long time. So generally speaking, you have to change your mindset to become a business owner. But then if you're at a stadium every day, you're cleaning the stadium, whatever have you, that's one thing. But oh my gosh, how do you run the team? So how did that go?
So that's a great question, Shawn. So part of my background during that time when I was in Cincinnati, now here in Cleveland, Ohio, was that I was the president of a nonprofit that supported families that had autistic kids. And the purpose of this nonprofit was to have events, and we had a big conference in Cincinnati for people to find resources and things like that. But like we would have like a Halloween party once a year. We'd have a Christmas party, and at the location of where this nonprofit was located. And the purpose of that was because so many times it's so overwhelming to do those things. In the community, even going to other families' houses. So we tried to create that environment for them. So during that time, I've learned that a nonprofit needs to be run like a business. Otherwise, it's not going to survive. So that 2 years of background, I kind of took with me with the idea of starting this business. Now, I had pretty much no money. I didn't take out any loans or anything, just started it with my own money, coaching two people. And then that kind of blossomed into, the word kind of got out. I would, it was a lot of word of mouth. I would connect with people in the community here in Cleveland. And, things just kind of spread. And now 8 years later, we have about 13 coaches. And we're providing coaching in about 7 or 8 different states. And we just got our first international client in Canada.
Wow. That's fantastic. Now tell me this. So you begin it, you're coaching. And Brian will tell you, I try to make sure that I limit, but I have so many things that come to my mind, trying to do one question at a time, right? So at what point did you go from, well, here's the first question. So you started out, I assume you're just doing these sessions out of your home, and then eventually transitioned to a brick and mortar in a different, a facility or something like that, or office space?
Not exactly. So the concept of our model is that it's either in people's homes or somewhere in the community, because so many times you're supporting someone in a location and then they have to use the skills somewhere else.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So, for example, if someone, for so many autistic people, like going grocery shopping or doing any type of shopping is overwhelming. So what I would do and my coaches would do is go grocery shopping with someone, or plan to go grocery, or plan with them in their home, or meeting somewhere in the community where they wanted to meet, and develop a plan for that. Because so many times that there is a lack of plan, whether it's, relating to shopping, whether it's relating to going to medical appointments, whether, relating to school. And a lot of what we do is kind of that planning, that executive functioning piece of things.
That is great. That's fantastic. So the next question is then, how did you go from, I'm taking these clients on, I'm doing the coaching, wait a minute, there's a lot of clients coming in, I need more coaches?
Initially my thought was, can we ever get big enough to where we'll need someone else to do the coaching beyond me? My philosophy is it's not about me, and it's about improving the lives of autistic people, the quality of that. And then if we can do that, maybe then the quantity in terms of more people we can provide services to. So as the demand grew, then I, for the first time in my life, interviewed people. And, just so happens the first person that I hired is still with me 7+ years later. So
that's fantastic.
There were definitely mistakes I made in the interviewing process. Let's not get that wrong. But it's never going to be 100% correct. But yeah, so it was just like, it was always, I see this need and let me do it.
Good. And it's funny because my mindset today is about personal development, growth, and advancement. It generally is, but especially today. So my questioning is going to be along those lines. And as you were talking about starting this, I thought, everybody should do something they haven't done before. So you mentioned that the first person you interviewed was someone that you had not interviewed anyone before, but yet that person is still with you. What was that experience like conducting the interview for the first time and getting through that?
So I think it was weird in the sense that it was almost like I had to get over the concept, like I have to make a decision on someone else's employment. That was kind of very stressful to me.
It weighed on you.
Yeah, a weight on me. And just saying no to people was really difficult. And, I think it was a struggle for me in that I have the ability to just kind of see the best in people. I think that was kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to start this, because I want other people, you talking about dreams and potential and all that. I want people to be able to maximize their potential and get whatever whatever they want or need in their life. So,
wow.
So I at times I saw the best. I definitely can see the best in everyone, but sometimes I didn't see the barriers that people had in their lives to access that potential and made mistakes in hiring as a result, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. It makes a lot of sense. So now let's kind of jump into what it is exactly that you do. I mean, you talked a little bit about preparation for life skills, like putting together a grocery list, grocery shopping and stuff like that. Because, in our case, I like to, and my wife always reminds me, like, don't think of limitations in terms of, when it comes to our son, with his eating in particular. We're just always like, oh, you never know what he's going to eat, because his diet is very limited because he's picky because of texture. So you never know, put something in front of him. But at the same time, I think about his independence with things like grocery shopping, and it comes at you at different times. He's 14 and a half. Today, all of a sudden I got to thinking about him driving. There's a friend actually that posted a video of them with their daughter getting her permit. And it got me to thinking all of a sudden, I was like, am I going to have that? And it wasn't that I know that we won't. I just honestly try to figure out, like, how could that come about? So it got me to thinking of those different pieces. Touch on some of the stuff that you actually provide and help people with then.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of just like things like grocery shopping, other than just like planning to go there, it's one of the, it's a sensory nightmare. When you walk into when you walk into the grocery store, it's the loudest part of the store. It's very overwhelming. You got the cashiers. So in that planning, with a lot of the people that we support, we're trying to support them in their sensory needs and trying to help them to, some people are not aware of their sensory needs. Some people are very aware. So kind of like everything is individualized, and coming up with like a plan to help each person meet those needs. So, things like having their sensory needs met, having, help executive functioning challenges, helping people be organized, things like time management, money management, just breaking a task down step by step, things like that are difficult. Sometimes people will get stuck, maybe like going through an application because visually maybe it's just overwhelming, or you're not quite sure how to answer the question. So that's kind of where you're meeting with your coach. Our coaching helps with those sorts of things. A lot of advocacy. We kind of work through with people, and that's really a big thing. The people that we coach have as much language as you or I, but being able to advocate for yourself is a big challenge. We're all somewhere on the advocacy spectrum. Some people are too strong of an advocate. Some people are not strong enough of an advocate. And then in different situations, we fluctuate on that spectrum. I'm naturally probably not as strong of an advocate, so I've had to learn to be a stronger advocate for myself, and being an entrepreneur has really kind of helped me in that area. I still have work to do, but I've definitely a lot further along where I was 8 years ago.
I don't think people. Let me say one thing. I don't think people who are outside of the special needs community really understand. I just wanted to go back to the whole grocery stores experience. How much sensory overload exists in our world, in our regular day-to-day activities. High traffic areas just outside can be overwhelming. Obviously, stores can be overwhelming, but just talk about that a little bit.
So pre-pandemic, one of the most common things we do in our society is going out to eat, right?
Yeah.
So that is probably one of the most overwhelming places to go.
Yeah.
The kitchen, all the people talking, the bus boy is getting the dishes, like all those things. And I think what people don't understand is like with people that are hypersensitive to sound, like it's not just those sounds, which some could be like really loud, or even like a baby screaming at a restaurant. So
Right.
it's not always how loud the sound is, it's the pitch of the sound, and it's also maybe not being able to filter out those sounds. So imagine if you have all those different sounds going on and you're not able to filter those things out. It is a very stressful thing. Now, and then another example, going back to the grocery store, just walking into the grocery store, the door opening, the electric door opening is where the sounds start. And then the cart is a sound. And then some of these carts don't work, so they're really loud. They rattle. It's just so frustrating when you don't get a good cart. Like, what the heck? That shouldn't even be there. And then you get your cart and you're walking in. Well, all the cash registers are up there. So the cashiers are talking to people. And then you have the conveyor belts with stuff, going on, and the beeping noises from the conveyor belts. And you have to manage all of those sounds just to start shopping. So you're starting out in a place of, you're really overwhelmed if you have, the sensory needs relating to sound. And we're not even getting into the lighting of grocery stores.
Sure.
Music
and things like that.
Sure.
And then we're not even getting into the visual aspects of all the choices we have, like how many different pastas there are, how many different choices of like cooking oil there are. Do we need 17 different pastas on the shelf? Is that really necessary?
Right.
And then like things like, Shawn, you were talking about your son with, texture wise. Well, sometimes there's changes in grocery stores in terms of this particular brand
or the layout.
The layout, maybe it doesn't. The store is not having that brand anymore, or the brand itself has changed.
The packaging or something like that. Even been
packaging.
There.
Like, and like I've went with so many adults where they wanted to get this pasta, and they're like, wait, this pasta isn't here anymore because it's the red, it's the box with the red and the blue on it. And then they changed it to the blue and the green.
And meltdown ensues if you're not careful. Yeah.
And the meltdown ensues because oh, wait a second. I literally can't eat if I don't have these foods.
Absolutely.
Can I say one thing to that too? It's interesting because my dad owned a grocery store and I grew up in a grocery store. So this kind of manufacturers don't even understand the impact that they have on their customers when they make a change. And I'll just get to really quickly, Downy fabric softener, which comes in that little blue bottle, they used to have a white cap, and then they experimented, they put a pink cap on it, and their sales plummeted. And that's just neurotypical, customers who are like, don't like change when it comes to a brand or new Coke or any of that. Like, manufacturers don't even understand the impact that they have. I can't even imagine, when you've got a child on the autism spectrum, there's some regimentation there that you're like, what do you mean you changed the label?
It's just a disaster. And then there could be also so many other things that pop up, just even like during the pandemic with all of like the changes in stores. And one of the crazy things is how they would have, they would put arrows on the floor, in terms of people can walk down this aisle this way, and then you can come back a different aisle. But then what would happen was that non-autistics would not be following those rules. So then, that would be like really stressful. So you've already changed the rules in terms of which aisles I can walk down. And then those aisles, people are not following the rules.
Wow.
So
Doug, you mentioned earlier, you were saying that all of your clients are as verbal as you or I. Does that mean that is that by choice? Do you have some that are nonverbal?
We have some that have used AAC and things like that, and even those that might have the language that you or I have, when they get overwhelmed, it is tough to provide for them to provide that verbal communication. So sometimes even with them, we'll use, other forms of, we'll text, or they'll write out notes, whatever type of communication works best. I think that's one of the frustrating things is that most of our communication is nonverbal anyway. So it's so frustrating how our society is so focused on that verbal communication, and it's almost like forced on people that they have to use that.
So it's just a matter of how the numbers play out. You don't have a preference or limitation on whether the clients are verbal or nonverbal. You're able to accommodate either one then, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead. Sorry.
The only times where we cannot necessarily support someone is when it becomes a safety issue. So like for some people, we provide Zoom services. So this is maybe not as much of an issue for them, but for the in-person services that we provide, because of the nature, it's one-on-one, it's just the coach and the individual, and say they're going out into the community. If that person might, when they get overwhelmed, they might run or something.
The eloping, yes.
Yeah, the eloping, or maybe they're overwhelmed, like in the car, and they might try to escape. Like, for the safety of that person and for the coach, we're not a good fit in those types of situations. But for anyone else, like, for any other autistic person, otherwise, no matter how much language they have, that's not a factor in.
That's not a factor.
Yeah, like we can support people effectively in all types of situations.
So we talked about grocery shopping because that's one of the most common life things, but I imagine if I came to you and I was a client, I was asking you about the services you provide, but is it fair to say that what you provide is dictated by what the client may need? Some of them might say, well, look, this is the issue we're having with him or her. These are the things that we'd like to conquer or, face or whatever the case might be. Is it dictated that way, or is there any other type of approach or criteria that you have?
It's always individualized. So people come to us with, with different needs, but, we've been doing this for 8 years and we've had a lot of clients previously and currently. So there's probably about 8 to 10 categories of things that we do, that almost anything that someone says, it kind of falls in those categories. So it can be self-advocacy, executive functioning things, supporting people's sensory needs, helping people in high school or college to be more successful. And it's not so much we help them as tutoring, but it's more helping them to connect with people at, in high school or college, or plan to study, or to advocate to help them to find people to help them to understand material. A lot of times we help people develop a transportation plan that works for them. So helping people to learn to drive, or if that's not realistic, public transportation, and maybe public transportation, it might not be safe for them. So then maybe we try to help them to navigate Uber and Lyft, or to help them to advocate to people in their support network for transportation. And then other things we do is we've helped people to transition from living at home with their parents or their guardian into more interdependent living. And I say I don't use the word independent because none of us live independently. We have some amount of independence, and then we count on other people for certain things. Like I certainly count on my wife, my partner, for certain things that I myself am not very good at.
I was just going to say, for anybody who's just joining us now, we're talking to Doug Blecher, Autism Personal Coach, and in fact, on his website, autismpersonalcoach.com, you can find he outlines the services and the work that they're doing. And you're in how many states now, Doug? 7 states, is that what you said?
Yeah, about 7 or 8. We provide Zoom coaching, and for anyone that's anywhere, we could provide that coaching if they think that would be beneficial to them. I'd say probably about, of the people that we coach, probably about 80 to 85% right now we're providing that type of coaching, because we found that does work better than I initially ever would have thought 7 or 8 years ago for people.
Wow. You're in, so you're in Cleveland. Brian and I are out here in Los Angeles, and Southern California, the state of California as a whole, is very progressive in terms of services and things like that are available, whether it's, ABA, respite, and so on. In your service, especially when it comes to things like grocery shopping, whether it's, I don't know if you're helping them adjust to being able to go to a restaurant and deal with sensory stuff, then do you have members or local businesses in the community that are cooperative? Like, for instance, as you were talking about the grocery store, I got to thinking, how cooperative is the grocery store? Do they know that there's someone coming in that may have a sensory, issue or need or whatever? Are they sensitive to that? Is there cooperation that you have with them with regard to those types of trips?
So yes and no. So they normally don't. If there's some type of accommodation we think could be helpful to the person, then one of their coach might reach out to the grocery store or to the restaurant. But we also, like, in addition to our coaching, we provide monthly kind of like social opportunities for people, events. And prior to the pandemic, we would have, like, for example, we would have monthly dinners here in Cleveland and also in Cincinnati, Ohio. And, we would mention things like before going into the restaurant, about certain things. But it is difficult just because of the nature of those locations to make too many accommodations, just because of the way they're built and set up.
Right.
If
they don't accommodate in a formal sense, just out of curiosity, because, you try not to take for granted that things are everywhere the way they are where you are. And the one thing that we found is, especially pre-COVID, my son would have a routine as to where he would go. There'd be places that, we'd go get something to eat. And there's certain stores you might go to get some candy or some treat or something like that. And he has to use the restroom at like each one of those places. He knows how the toilet works, the gallons per flush, all that kind of stuff. And as we're going from one portion of the store to the other, or even in and out of it, he has to be the one to, make sure that the door opens. And if somebody messes with the rhythm of the door opening or his path, he's like, you went from first getting upset, no, oh my gosh, they've broken it up, to just standing there waiting. And I'd have to explain to people, no, you just go ahead. And over time, the people that worked in the store were very accommodating, and some of them to the point where I had to kind of make sure that they struck a balance between, keeping it real and not being too accommodating, because he'd have certain individuals that he would want to ring him up at a specific register. And then after a while, he had them wrapped around his finger too. And they would be like, oh, I can get off of this register. So I don't know if there's that level of, cooperation or assistance or anything like that. Do you see anything like that?
Yeah. There has been, I guess it's, depends on the restaurants. Like sometimes, restaurants have this really annoying thing. And I don't know why our society feels the need to be playing music at restaurants, like any restaurant, playing background music. But like we've asked, can you possibly turn off the music or lower it? We've asked about lighting. We've asked about spots in the restaurant where it isn't as loud, or people wouldn't be walking by. It's a little bit more private, things like that. We've asked for. Restaurants have usually been accommodating. Other times they've kind of like looked at us crazy, like why we would be asking for that. And I tried to explain, and if they still didn't get it, it's kind of like how we've talked with people about employment. Like if we're disclosing this thing and they're still not that accommodating, do we really want to be there in the first place?
Right.
It's kind of like when people where we have conversations about people, whether they want to disclose in an interview or not. If you disclose that information and that causes them not to hire you, do you really want to be working in that place to begin with? So that's kind of how that goes.
Listen, in Los Angeles, the accommodation, I mean, I don't think my mother ever sat at a table she was seated at in a restaurant for years. Every time she sat down, she was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. Can you put me in certain restaurants are used to dealing with, if they're used to dealing with my mother, they're used to dealing with making accommodations. And if they don't, you're right, it's at a restaurant you want to patronize. But it is interesting. And we had, I think our very first guest, we had a gal, Layla Luna, on our show who
I was thinking of her.
Yeah, her son is on the autism spectrum as well, and she had an experience at a restaurant where the restaurant asked her to take her family and leave the restaurant because patrons were complaining, and she is a big advocate of trying to create a national standard for creating training for organizations, as Shawn was kind of alluding to, restaurants and grocery stores and that type of thing, to get some training on how to accommodate folks that have some sensory issues. And then even carving out for a restaurant, it's easy. And if that there's a particular time of the afternoon where it's kind of slow business wise, you can actually carve out a section of the restaurant and a time, and then advertise that, like, friendly, family friendly for, folks who might have some sensitivity around that. I get it. I mean, we're talking really about inclusion. This is where the general grand society has to look at inclusion for families that have issues, because interestingly enough, if whether you have a child that's on the spectrum or a child that's dealing with some special needs issues, as we get older, we have certain accommodations that we want to request. I can't imagine, going to a ball game, when we're back and going to ball games, but live, and the crowd noise and all of that, how that is for anybody who has any sensitivity around sensory issues. And so, the idea of inclusion, I'm just going on a rant here, I don't know why, but inclusion for this community really extends beyond the special needs community. And, we're big fans of supporting any effort that will provide education for those organizations to be able to make sure that this community, which is significant, is taken care of. Because I think the easy way out is to just, let the families do it on your own. Shawn, I'm sure that you've dealt with restaurants that could have cared less about your personal situation. They're there to serve food, and you're there to eat it. And,
I've dealt with some of that, but it's funny. I was gonna, I don't know if we could do a whole show on this. I know I could, but I think that, and this is going to be as true as it is corny. And Doug, I'm curious as to what you think of this, especially with your experience. But I think that we tend to get a lot of what we give and or expect, because to say that my experience or our experience is not without judgment, or somebody making us feel bad, or leaving an establishment just feeling defeated, it is the minority. The majority of it, we found people to be very, very accommodating. And I can't say that I'm just like Captain Mantra and I just expect everything to be positive, but I'm a little surprised when it isn't that way. And so, having gotten some of that, I try to make sure that I, project that, even though, there's been times when there's a whole lot of anxiety and you're like, oh gosh, I just don't know how this is going to go. And, and then we tend to complicate it too, because the thought is, look, we're going to go. And if it doesn't work, we'll leave, and sometimes that's easier said than done. But I think we've been lucky for the most part. And a lot of it has been me personally, to the point where I don't care how many people are looking when there's a meltdown that takes place. This is our experience. And I had to grow into that too. But what's your experience been like, Doug? Have you found that, and again, this is limited primarily to the Cleveland area, but, have you found more businesses to be understanding of some kind, or the latter? I mean, otherwise, or what's your experience been?
Yeah, I think so. I think businesses are understanding. I think they are definitely. I think it's probably the exception, not the rule, that they have would not honor some of these requests and accommodations.
Yeah.
I think sometimes they just don't know. And it's your job to, it's certainly my job, my coach's job, to kind of educate them. And
it's
then
all our jobs.
It's all our jobs, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Advocates. Yeah, advocates. Yeah.
And I don't think that they want, parents that have kids with a disability or any disabled adults leaving the restaurant and not returning because they were not honoring their accommodations. And then what I've seen, sometimes that's not true, but then what I've seen other times is when, other customers will say something, the manager will come out and speak to those people and say, look, this is the situation. And, if they're not listening to the parent or the disabled person that is dealing with that stress, or trying to say, look, I'm autistic. This is very overwhelming to me, what's happening right now. If they're not really listening to them, then they seem to usually listen to a manager or someone else, one of the employees there. Sometimes people are just jerks. And, I've words to describe them. I don't want to say out of our show right now, this live show. But yeah, I mean, those are just kind of, things that, just sometimes happen.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Shawn, talk about a view to mine. Ask, I mean, hey, let's get some free coaching. I'm just kidding. But Shawn, just maybe you had this conversation with Doug, prior to getting on the show, but Elijah has been having some interesting changes in his sleep pattern, which has impacted the entire family. Have you guys? I don't know if you guys had that conversation. Will you want to talk about that a little bit with Doug, and just kind of, just to give
we
people
didn't talk about that, but yeah, from a general standpoint, and I don't know if that's something that you work with, because that happens, as for those that may or may not be aware, boys produce less melatonin than girls. Yeah, and a disruptive sleep pattern is part of the autism experience anyway, but more so with boys than with girls. And so we've gone through that in terms of ups and downs and highs and lows and everything. So if you're, is that something, because it seems like you generally deal with the transition piece in terms of independence, but is that something that you coach somebody through as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're certainly no sleep experts, but what we do a lot of times is help people to develop healthy habits, help people to develop routine. Because as I heard one autistic person say once, routine is the foundation of the autistic experience. So having a sleep routine is really that works for that person. And again, it's something that's individualized, is essential, because if any of us humans do not have good sleep, we're pretty much screwed. The next day, forget it.
What you said is important too. Good. So you're talking about quality, not necessarily just the quantity. Because I know personally, I can get 8 hours of crappy sleep, and the next day I'm just like, and then I get 5 to 6 hours of deep sound sleep, and I'm like, it's like night and day. It really makes a big difference. So and again, I'm digging a little, and you mentioned it's very individualized, but what are some of the things that you suggest for somebody that is in a situation like that, where maybe parents are trying to come up with a routine, trying to come up with a habit, maybe to the point of medication, who knows what, but the pattern is better, but still just, a little erratic.
So for example, in this situation, so I always say with our coaching, we never start with answers. We always start with questions.
Questions. I love that.
And our client and also their support network we want to use their expertise to help come up with individualized answers. So, so thinking about sleep, some of the things that we think about, because, so many of the people we coach have challenges with sleep, whether it's getting to sleep or waking up.
Asleep.
Yeah, and staying asleep. Yeah. I don't have to tell you about that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing, something I would want to know is what is family sleep history? So is there anyone in the family that have had some of those issues before?
I'm going to tell you, there's value. I value us being able to do this generally, Brian and I, this format and everything. I value the time of each guest. I value yours. But I'm going to tell you something that you'll really appreciate.
Yeah.
There's a variety of people that we have spoken to that have given us some good information and everything. That is a question that I don't believe we have been asked before, but it's so simple that it's like right there in front of you. Yeah, that's tremendously, that's huge.
The reason I asked that question is because if sometimes people, like you said, sometimes people just don't look at like the most simple things that are right in front of them, because if there is a history of family sleep, then getting a sleep study. We've had a lot of people we've supported. It's not a fun experience at all.
It doesn't seem like it.
No, hell no.
I've considered it for myself for just some other reasons and health things that I was going through, and and it was like visited it and kind of like because the other thing is with everything else that we've been dealing with as far as the erratic patterns and everything, I don't know that they would get what they want, because in order to get what they want, you need to be asleep for a certain period of time too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I've seen these sleep studies be helpful, and then it's led to some diagnosis. Some of our people we coach end up using CPAP machines that have been really helpful. Something like that is, just kind of one of those basic things that we look at initially, with sleep routine, and then kind of look at like I've used melatonin myself. We ask, things like that. In terms
Cherry.
Cherry. Cherry. There you go, Shawn.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, blueberry too. That's good
too.
Also.
Hilarious.
Other things like, for example, that's been helpful to some people is, talking about people's sensory needs using a weighted blanket.
Got one of those.
There you go.
They're great.
Oh my God.
Matter of fact, we got one of those. Neurotypical kids. They were like, "Wait a minute, is Elijah using his blanket? Can I?" And so some of the kids bought one.
Yeah, I've never slept so well using a heavy blanket that I bought for my son.
They're fantastic.
Yeah, I have a 20-pound weighted blanket. It's great.
Oh my God. So amazing.
I know, it's heavy. But and I've slept better since getting that weighted blanket. So things like that, like even like thinking about for myself, the best sleep I get is when I'm in hotels, because it's really dark in hotel rooms and they have the blackout curtains. So thinking about, the light that comes in. Also, thinking about all different things like, their diet, and maybe like, are they, soda consumption or in my case, coffee consumption.
Right.
So there's all these different factors, and sometimes like we've had people that get like white noise machines that really help them, because they, just because of their sound sensitivities and anxieties, just hearing any bit of noise outside can be like really alarming and can wake them up. So there's we could spend just a show, Shawn, just talking about
just to sleep.
Oh, easily.
And what? I think it's funny for anybody else that's watching and they have kind of the same question. the one thing I got from you that's valuable is that we're on the right track, even in the areas where we might not have answers or solutions. And you just have to be, and this is why I love my wife. Her thought is like, okay, well, let's try this. All right, we try this. Did it work? Okay, let's adjust this thing. All right, if that thing did, let's scrap that. Let's try something else. And you just keep going and you keep doing that, and until you find the thing that works. So for anybody that's going through that, that's something to keep in mind. Tell me something. What is the biggest challenge that you have faced in your situation? Because in your business, because it seems like you've probably got a handful of clients that came in, and as a result of their diagnosis or disability or whatever the case might be, have some challenges, and you probably got some good stories about things that you've helped them to conquer and help them along their way and increase their level of independence. What are some of the most challenging ones that you've had, or somewhere maybe they went away not significantly changed or improved? And in those cases, what did you learn from that?
So I would say there's two, actually. So one's from the actual client, and then for clients that have family members involved, there's something from families that it's been a challenge. So from the client themselves, is a lot of times people are not ready for coaching when they start with us, just because they don't know what being autistic means to them. They've heard a lot of things. They've heard a lot of things from society.
Meaning the client themselves. So someone has been, say, I'm on the spectrum, diagnosed with autism, but depending on my experience, I might not have identified what being on the autism spectrum means to me.
Yeah, because there's the famous saying, you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So you being diagnosed with autism and me being diagnosed are going to be two different things. So what does that mean for you, Shawn? And what does that mean for me? So just even taking that example, how that would be different for us is we're both autistic. And being autistic, you have a marginalized identity. You're marginalized in the society that we live in. You have more challenges than a non-disabled person dealing, just challenges of being autistic, and then just the challenges of the way society treats us. But then also, as a Black person or any person of color, there is that challenge as well. So, like, for example, we have groups we have an autistic, Black, Indigenous, and person of color group, because the experiences of autistic people of color are going to be different than autistic white people.
You know something?
Yeah.
Here's what's so amazing about you saying that. I met someone on social media who has a nonprofit based on that. She's an African American, and so it is based on that experience. So I would like to tell you that, my son is 14 and a half. He was diagnosed at the age of 3. My wife is Mexican, but if you see him, he'll identify as Black, even though people would say that he's quote unquote mixed, whatever the case might be. But all these years with that diagnosis, you would think that I might have thought of those differences a long time ago. I'd be lying, because I don't know if it's because you're just so focused on what's right in front of you. But when I met this person, this lady on Instagram that had her group, and we were trying to, talking about possibly doing some things together, I wasn't even necessarily sure of what the differences, might be. I've thought of situations as it pertains to maybe interacting with police or something like that. Sure. But when I learned where she was, she happened to be in Florida, and right away my perspective shifted a little, and I got to thinking of, okay, that would be different, just like it would be different at a certain age. So that's tremendous that you have that within your organization.
Thank you.
I just want to jump to one thing, because we're getting close to our time. As I said, it's amazing.
Flies by.
Show, it goes by really quick.
It fly by. You're right.
Right. I told you, because it goes quickly. So a couple things. I just want to take a minute here. I'm going to put some links up on the screen here for people to see who are watching the podcast that you do, because you have podcasts on your site. You want to just introduce those podcasts? So I know there's the info dump files. You want to talk about these? briefly.
So the Info Dump Files, I co-host with the phenomenal Becca Laurie Hector. She's an autistic woman. And that podcast is about focusing on autistic interests or the special interests or passions of autistic people. Because so many times we talk we talk about these serious things and the challenges of autistic people, but we don't talk about things that brings them joy or things like that. And these interests are so beneficial in so many ways to people on the spectrum, whether it brings employment or it helps reduce overwhelm or it helps them to develop friendships or find romantic partners. So that's kind of what this podcast is about. It's just a fun 45 minutes to an hour, me and Becca, and we talk to different guests each time.
Nice. So that's Info Dump Files. We've put the link on the chat here on the screen and also down below. But it's a HTTPS colon / It's anchor.fm/info dump files DUMP info dump. So that's awesome. And then you've got another here that's Autism Stories. It's an Autism Stories podcast.
Yeah. So this was the original podcast. I just do this myself as the host, and we just launched our 115th episode, and it's just talking with it's turned into talking into a different autistic person every Monday to learn from their stories, experience, and get their advice. Because while professionals, you could learn a lot about autism professionals, you can learn about family members. The people that I learn most about autism are autistic people, because they are the true experts of the autistic experience. So we just talk with them about these experiences, and they give some amazing advice.
That's fantastic. And I would say for anybody, rather than me spelling it out, go to autismpersonalcoach.com to find these podcasts. There's one more that you talk about. I'm going to put up on the screen for those who are viewing. It's Intersections on the Spectrum.
Yeah. So
talk about that a little bit.
So kind of what we were talking about a little bit earlier, there's being autistic, there's many different intersections. And one of those, some of those intersections are being Black, Indigenous, or being a person of color. So we have a lot of those conversations on this podcast. So a lot of those intersections are relating to another marginalized identity, which is being part of the LGBT community. So we have autistic people that are also part of the LGBT community. We have a lot of those conversations as well on this podcast, as well as talking to autistic people that are also in all these come from different cultures, and what is being autistic like in that culture.
Interesting. Fascinating. I'm going to pull us off the screen. Again, Doug, we could, spend another hour talking about things. And I know Shawn's dying to talk more. Hopefully you guys, and this is a great opportunity for us, as Shawn and I have talked about, and Doug, I mentioned this earlier, doing some additional bonus content, if you will, additional content that we're going to make available on our YouTube channel. There might be opportunity for you to have some interesting conversation. I say the two of you because Shawn is dealing with with Elijah with his autism. Obviously those are issues that are near and dear to his heart, near and dear to my heart too. But I don't experience them on a daily basis or a nightly basis as Shawn does. So with that, we'll begin to wrap this show up. Doug, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here and sharing what you do. I'm excited that this community has the kind of help and support that you're providing. I'm hoping that you become wildly successful and you have opportunity to coach folks all over the country, and once the pandemic is over, more in-person stuff as well. So thank you for your time. I want to thank our, folks who have listened in today, those who have caught us live on Facebook. Thank you for joining us. Anybody who's catching us on the YouTube channel, thank you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, share this content with as many people as you can so we can broaden the reach of our village. Thank you to my daughter, Jordan. Joe is always on and always taking part in this conversation. So grateful to her, grateful to Shawn Hall, who has got some sporadic internet duties, but is still participating and dropping stuff in the chat for people to see. Thank you, Shawn in Hawaii, our great friend, Shawn Francis, as always. Thank you. I think the one thing, Doug, that I always say at the end of the show is that this is all about, it's all about empathy and love. We didn't get to our question, Shawn. It's all about empathy and love in this community, in this world, in our society. So please share empathy and love with as many people as you can now more than ever. So Shawn, you want to wrap us up? I don't know if you want to.
Yes, we can do it really quick. Doug, I have a question that we usually close out with before I usually send us on our merry way. Sure. Think of a belief that you held dearly and firmly, even had a, part of your being that you have since done a complete about face on, something you held dearly that you no longer believe.
It's a really interesting question. And I guess the thing that pops into my mind is I don't think I was ever believed in kind of like the energy / kind of like psychic medium. And I guess recently what I've really learned is how important energy is, and how having that type of positive energy and focusing on things that truly make you happy can really galvanize your life. So, it's easy to complain about anything. And certainly there's legitimate reasons to, but just trying to find kind of the positive energy in anything is really what I've been trying to focus on.
Great. Excellent. The whole reason for asking that is to remind people and for them to see examples of the importance of change, the value in change. And it's so easy because we were talking earlier about creatures of habit as we are as human beings. This is what I do. That's just what I know. That's just what we do. We are here to grow and progress. And our ability to change and remain open to new ideas allows us to be able to do the following, which I will close out with as I always do, which is to remember that somebody someplace needs to know that they matter. Everybody needs to know that you care. Somebody needs to know that they're heard and that they're seen. And with that said, I want to thank the women in my life, as I always do, my mom, Jan, and my amazing wife, Laura. I would not be able to be who I am or attempt to even be who I hope to become without them. And again, thank you everyone for tuning in. We will see you next time. And Doug, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Shawn.
Yep. And if anybody who's watching or listening, we love you. Thank you so much.
We love you. Thank you.